can see 6 people. That's it.
Yeah, Jim, you'll need to mute Susan for the time being.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's just going to take a few seconds. Going up to YouTube is done. And okay, so we're recording and it's also live streaming to YouTube.
Okay, good. Let's start the meeting then. Good evening. This is Frank Herbert. Welcome to the Township of Hillsborough Board of Adjustment public meeting for Wednesday, September 2, 2020. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. This meeting will be conducted virtually, we hope. The public will be given an opportunity to participate remotely through Zoom by entering the links listed in the agenda. The agendas on the township website, or by calling one of the telephone numbers listed in the agenda. All documents pertaining to any applications on the agenda were available on the township website 10 days prior to this meeting. Board members, staff, and consultants will be participating remotely. Applicants will be presenting remotely and will identify themselves before testifying. This meeting has been duly advertised according to Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, called the Sunshine Law. Notice of the 2020 annual meeting schedule has been provided to the officially designated newspapers, the township clerk, and posted on a bulletin board at the township municipal complex. Additional notice has been provided to communicate that this meeting is being conducted by electronic means only. Tina, would you take a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Stamler, absent. Ms. Haynes.
Here.
Mr. Sirachi, absent. Ms. Salili.
Here,
Mr. Valchek, absent. Ms. Erickson.
Here.
Mr. Wallmacher.
Here.
Mr. Basil, absent. Chairman Herbert.
Here.
Mr. Euro.
Here.
Mr. Anderson, you're present? Yeah, there you are. Okay, and Mr. Gorman.
Here, thank you.
Okay, and I'm here.
We also have Jim Hurry from our Township IT department.
Okay.
Okay, going down the agenda, consideration of meeting minutes, we have none this evening. Consideration of resolutions, we have none this evening. Is there any Board of Adjustment business that anybody would like to bring up? Remember? Seeing none. At this point, we'll ask for business from the floor for matters not on the agenda. So at this point, Jim will unmute the public line, and if anybody listening in from the public has something to say that's not on the agenda, please tell us right now.
Okay, we should be unmuted.
Okay, so is there anybody on the public line that would like to talk to us about something that's not on the agenda? Susan is still there? She's muted. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so it's working. Okay. At this point, I hear none. So Jim, you can mute the public line again.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to make sure that through Susan that we actually had. Okay. We have 3 public hearings tonight. The first one is Daniel E. Chang, file BA 1920. Patrick, would you introduce it, please?
Sure. Our first application tonight is Mr. Daniel E. Chang, file number BA 19-20, located at block 174.04 and lot 59, otherwise known as 9 Starview Drive. The applicant is seeking a C-block variance for relief from maximum impervious coverage to construct a new tennis court in the rear yard of the property in the R district. So just to bring the board up to speed, if you recall, the applicant had previously requested to the board, and the board granted an extension of the time of the decision no later than October 1st, 2020. And we did this at the at the February 6th Board of Adjustment meeting.
Okay, Mr. Frank Linus is the attorney for the applicant, so Mr. Linus?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Francis P. Linus, my offices are in Somerset, New Jersey, and I'm pleased to represent Mr. Chang this evening. First of all, I want to thank the board and its professionals and its staff for the patience in putting this together and having the ability to present an application during the coronavirus crisis, virtually notwithstanding. Basically, by way of additional background, I think Patrick did describe the application, but by additional background, Dan Chang lives at the premises, that's 9 Starview Drive, with his family. And on the site, there's an existing 2-story frame dwelling with ancillary improvements. The site's located in the residential R zone, has frontage on Starview Drive. What he's seeking tonight is an impervious coverage variance. We have with Daniel will give some brief testimony. We then have Mike Ford, our engineer, who'll talk about the engineering aspects and the technical aspects of the application. And then finally, we have Kevin O'Brien, our licensed professional planner, who will testify in support of the variance requested. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Daniel Chang. Dan, where are you?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep. Mr. Chang, Mr. Herbert, would you like me to swear in Mr. Chang?
Please.
Mr. Chang, I can't see you, but would you please raise your right hand?
Sure.
Is your right hand raised?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I swear.
Thank you. Mr. Linus, you may begin.
Let me just say, Mr. Chang, I see a white field in his video. Is that something you're doing, or we just can't see you?
You just can't see me.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, before I proceed with Mr. Chang, I just want to confirm that we did supply notice. We did file the notice in the appropriate affidavits, and I'm asking the board to take jurisdiction over this application.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, Dan, you purchased the property, I understand, in 2017 as new construction. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And who lives at the property with you?
It's myself and my wife.
Okay. And why? And your wife is Susan Huang?
No, it's Sarah Susan Hua, H-U-A-H.
Gotcha. And you're co-owners of the property, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And what are you proposing to do this evening, and what would you like the board to do?
We're proposing to build a clay court tennis court in our backyard, and we're just seeking approval from a variance.
Okay. Would this be a private tennis court available to you, your family, and guests?
Yes, this is strictly recreational.
Okay. And do you have any tennis background? Did you play tennis in the past?
Yeah, so both of us actually come from tennis playing families. We played through our childhood, through high school, through college. We actually met on the tennis court. So tennis has played a very big part in our lives.
Okay. And are you proposing what one would term to be a standard size tennis court?
Yes.
Okay. And again, are you proposing any lighting for the tennis court?
No.
Okay. Why did you move to Hillsborough?
We really liked the town. It was a very family-friendly town. We just figured it was a great place to, settle down and start a family here. So.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Okay, next witness.
Mike Ford. Unmute yourself, Michael.
Mr. Chairman, you do need to give the public an opportunity to ask questions of the witness.
Yeah, that's a good point. At this point, okay, so motion to open public. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Not hearing any. Public's open. Okay, so this is to public attendees. Is there any questions for the witness, that Mr. Chang? At this point, Jim, if you can unmute the public line for them to answer that.
Sure. Actually, the public can raise their hand.
A lot of these are in by telephone, so I don't know if it's.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm unmuting everyone on the public.
It looks like they're actually getting muted.
Okay.
Hello,
Who's that?
my name is Virginia Sprague. I'd like to speak.
Okay, now, do you have a question for this witness or?
No, I don't have a question. I just wanted to speak about, I'm the neighbor that my yard joins with his yard.
Okay, let me just tell you, you're going to have an opportunity to make your own statement after the applicant's witnesses speak.
All right, that's fine. Thank you. Then I'll just hold on. Thank you
Right, so
very
at
much.
this point, if you have a question, for the witness, this is the time
No,
to ask.
I don't have any question.
Okay, and it's good to know that you can unmute yourself. Is there anybody else in the public that has a question for this witness? Okay, hearing none, you can remute everything. While he's doing that, Frank, why don't you go ahead with the next witness?
Okay, Mike Ford, were you sworn in yet, Mike?
No, I'll get him now. Mike, where are you? Let me see. Oh, there you are. You can move to the corner. Yes, Mike, do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
All right, before you present your testimony, do you have any exhibits to display, Mike?
Let me just put in here, Mike has testified before this board many times, so we can accept his qualifications as a professional engineer.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All
All
right.
right, Mike, do you have any exhibits you'd like to present to the board and the public regarding
I
this
can-
application?
I can share right now. This is just shared the project plans. These were submitted as part of the application. They're available on the township website. And it's a 3-sheet set of plans.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to mark that as Exhibit A1.
You got that, Tina?
I
Okay.
got that, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mike, do you want to present some testimony regarding the application and the proposed variance?
Yes, sir. Okay. Everybody can see my hand over the exhibit. So when I refer to something, I'm pointing at it. Right now, I'm hovering over the existing dwelling. There's a driveway on the south side of the property. As was introduced, the property fronts on Starview Drive. This plan shows not only the existing conditions with the existing driveway and dwelling, but all the existing topographic conditions. And what you'll see, the contour lines, there's a strong slope, if you will, a 10% slope approximately across the rear of the property. That's where the tennis court is to be located. The tennis court, as was stated, would be a standard size tennis court, 25 feet off the rear property line and 16 feet off both the north and south property line, directly behind the dwelling. All construction access would be via the existing driveway, right off the end of the existing driveway. And with regards to the installation of the tennis court, we're proposing to use retaining walls and work with the existing slope by providing retaining walls on the upslope side of the tennis court, as well as the downslope side of the tennis court, to minimize the need to do any regrading beyond the limits of the tennis court. So the retaining walls effectively allow us to stop our limit of disturbance right at those retaining walls, and the existing grade would remain the same beyond that point. The tennis court itself is proposed to be constructed of a material, not a standard tennis court, if you will, that most people would be familiar with, which would be made of asphalt pavement and a coating over the asphalt for the surface of the tennis court. This is, as Mr. Chang stated, to be constructed out of a material referred to as a clay tennis court. In other words, unlike the asphalt court, this would be a more porous tennis court and allow runoff or rainwater to drain down through it. In fact, in support of the application, we provided a pretty voluminous documentation regarding the manufacturer and supplier of this type of tennis court that justifies and actually analyzes the porosity of the tennis court to be at virtually 4 inches per hour, which is a high permeability rate, if you will, as opposed to the native soils in this area as shown on the county soil surveys are Clinesville and Lehigh soils, which have a permeability rate less than that. So this would be more permeable than the native soils. And the fact that the court takes a otherwise strong slope where runoff would be encouraged to drain fast and through the property by replacing that strong 10% slope with essentially a flat surface. It also helps to enhance the permeability of rainfall. So in other words, from a drainage standpoint, we don't anticipate there will be no adverse impact to our neighbors as far as runoff. Should be an actual enhancement because this type of material is almost like a dry well in a sense, in addition to a tennis court that would promote groundwater recharge of any rainwater that falls on the tennis court. The subject of the application is not the fact that we're installing a tennis court, but the tennis court, while I've just described it as a permeable surface, is still characterized in the zoning as a impervious surface. So the existing impervious coverage on the site is 13.17%. If you count the entire proposed tennis court, approximately 7,000 square feet, as impervious surface, that increases the impervious surface on this site from a zoning standpoint to 30.7%. That's the relief we're requesting for that exceedance of the maximum allowable 15% impervious coverage in this zone, the OR zone. There is details in the plan, and we actually received another review memorandum from Mr. Euro this afternoon that show piping within the tennis court detail. That actually is piping that'll allow for the applicant to maintain the dampness or, basically irrigate the surface of the court, because otherwise it's so permeable, the dust, if we will, of the clay court would dry out. So that maintains it as a playable surface.
All right, did you have the opportunity, Michael, to review not only Mr. Euro's report, but the other staff reports? So first, let's stick with Mr. Euro's report. What can you say about Mr. Euro's report, and will your client comply with all of the recommendations?
Yes. Yes, and the only other added feature that I'd like to describe with the tennis court is that there'll be a fence enclosing the entire perimeter of the tennis court, and it's a standard type of fence you would see around a tennis court, which is 10 feet high and would have what they call a windscreen on it. About 70% of the fence is covered with a green windscreen to help cut down wind and provide for tennis play.
Did you have an opportunity? There were two engineering review reports.
Excuse me, Mr. Lanus?
Yes.
Bob, Mr. Chair, this is Bob Euro. Can I ask Mr. Ford one or two questions?
Sure.
Mr. Ford, just for clarification for the
Bob?
Yes,
Oh, you died off there.
sorry. Mr. Ford, just for clarification for the record, the retaining walls that are going to be built around the tennis court. So just for clarification, the south side of the tennis court will be sunken about 6 feet below existing grade. And then the north side or left side of the court will be elevated roughly 7 to 8 feet above grade. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Utilizing the specifications for the tennis court and the piping beneath the court, you provided testimony that there is a feed line for water, which I'm assuming will be coming from the dwelling.
Correct.
Just confirm that there is no drainage line leaving the tennis court to be connected into any existing public drainage system.
That's correct.
Okay. The impacts, do we anticipate any impacts to any of the adjoining properties by drainage patterns or the infiltration of the stormwater through the tennis court material?
No, no increase in runoff to any of our neighbors.
Okay, Mr. Chair, that's all I have.
Hey, Mr. Linus, do you have more presentation?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mike, have you had the opportunity to review any other staff reports?
Yes, there's a zoning report, right?
Okay, and are there any issues with respect to the zoning report?
No,
All right, are there any outside agency approvals that are necessary to implement this project?
we've received already sign off by the Somerset Union Soil Conservation District, the county exemption letter, and we do have to comply or apply to the Delaware American Canal Commission, receive their approval.
Okay.
And certainly we do that like any other application as a condition of any approval this board may grant.
All right. And Michael, by virtue of the surface that will be employed should this application be approved, do you see any engineering obstacles to having the impervious coverage variance granted?
No.
Okay. I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I have a few myself, but I'll ask the board members first if you ask questions, if you have any.
Yeah, Chicky Haynes, Mike, who did the testing that said that this type of material has that kind of permeability? Was it just the company that manufactures it, or was there any independent testing?
It's a lab, and it was provided as part of our application. It's on the website. So yeah, it was.
Well, I do have that report,
Yeah.
but is that, who pays for that report? The manufacturing company pays for it, right?
Yeah, I don't know the origin or how it was supplied. No.
Okay. The other thing is, will any soil be either added or removed to level the court?
We've endeavored to try to balance that. That's why, as Mr. Euro described, we have the cut, into the slope on the upslope side and a fill on the downslope side. So our expectation and our desire, our goal would be to not have to import any more material other than the material specific to install the court, the surface and the material below the surface.
Okay, did you also check to see what type of soil would be immediately underneath the surface and as to its drainage and permeability?
Yeah, we haven't done site-specific soil testing, but I have, as I testified, reviewed the Somerset County's soil survey, and it identifies a Clinesville soil in this location, as well as a Lehigh soil.
What does that mean?
Well, they also identify for those types of soil the type of permeability it has, and that would be at or less than what the proposed tennis court would be. And one of the condition, or one of the items in Mr. Euro's report is that to the extent we need to, we would do on-site soil testing or other permeability testing to Mr. Euro's satisfaction as it relates to stormwater runoff and drainage.
But Mike, if we either have to approve or not approve it tonight, how will that testing after the fact give us information on this application?
Well, we already know that the permeability rate of the court surface itself is 4 inches per hour, which is excellent. You know, I'll say in septic terms, if I do soil testing that's better than 2 inches per hour, that's an excellent site. Most of the sites throughout Hillsborough and Somerset County that we test on a regular basis for septic systems have much less permeability than that.
You're
And
talking about this artificial surface, right?
Right, the artificial surface. And the reason I say that is because without the court today, you have native soils that have a permeability that's advertised in the soil survey, the county soil survey, at less than 4 inches per hour. And that coupled with the fact that the native soils have a slope on them that's 10%. So even, you know, the fact that they have permeability, they also have a slope that when water hits that slope, it is, you know, promoted to run off quickly because of the steepness of the site. The fact that we're replacing that surface not only with a permeable surface, but with a very absolutely flat surface would further help to promote drainage into the ground and not off the surface.
One more question. You said that the piping underneath is actually to add moisture to the surface. Is this lot served by well or by city water?
I think we have public water here. Mr. Chang can verify that.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
We're not confusing one witness for another. If Mr. Chang
Okay.
testify, let's take his
Okay.
testimony.
Okay,
It's public water and sewer.
got it, Mike. Thank you.
I just saw that there's a water line in the front. Small on my screen.
Hey, any other questions from other members of the board?
Yeah, Frank, it's Jim Walmacher. I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Jim.
Just by way of background, I lived for 15 years at the top of Murray Drive, so I've been up and down Starview Drive probably 5,000 times in my life, and I'm pretty familiar with the slope. It's probably one of the steepest in all of Hillsborough. Water that comes from the property to the south, how is that being redirected around the court?
There's there'll be a little swale on the upslope side of the court, but we're not proposing tremendous regrading there. So there is likely a portion of that runoff that would actually run onto the court. And we proposed at the edge of the court, you see at the base of the retaining wall, a little stone area to further promote drainage and no, vegetation growing at the base of the retaining wall.
Okay, and on the uphill side, the fence is not on top of the wall. The fence is inside of the wall, on the court side of the wall, right?
We proposed it to be around the entire wall, so it would likely be, I would say right now, we would propose to put it on top of the wall, but I think you're maybe making a good point is that it wouldn't need to be 10 feet at that point. It would just need to be 10 feet above the surface of the court. That's the intention.
Okay, so the height of the fence would be basically flat, right? The same as the court surface is flat. It's not like the fence would be sort of going up the slope and getting higher as you got further uphill.
Well, the retaining wall on the downslope side is even with the court, so that portion would be straight. On the upslope side, where the retaining wall is 6 feet high, that would require protection at the top of the retaining wall from a building code standpoint. So I think the fence at that location would have to be on top of the wall to protect people from going over the wall more so, or just as much as, keep enclosing the court. So at that point, for all intents and purposes, the fence would be 4 feet high or 10 feet above the surface.
Understood. And then on the north side of the court, the fence sits at the level of the court. So it's basically a 10-foot high fence on top of a 7-foot high retaining wall. So it's 17 feet above the grade at that point.
That's correct.
Okay, that's pretty high.
Okay, any other questions from other members of the board?
Frank,
God, sorry, Phil.
That's okay. Frank, this is Philomena. I'm looking at an environmental commission report, which is dated February 7th in 2020, Mike. And it's basically says the commission notes that the permeability of the court should not be a problem relative to the runoff of the adjacent properties, but the commission is requesting the applicant provide a count of trees to be removed in confirmation of the approval from the DRCC. Do we have that?
Yes, we need to make application and get DRCC approval. So that's not done yet, but we will do that. And with regards to the count of trees, it's approximately 20 trees that would have to be disturbed as part of the installation of the tennis court.
Okay, so the approval is what's pending from the DRCC, right?
Right. Yeah, believe it or not, you know, most applications that are only 7,000 square feet of impervious coverage, you know, that's under a quarter acre, we would get an exemption from the DNR Canal Commission. But in this case, the DNR Canal Commission looked at this lot in totality with, you know, the prior construction since 1980. So the tennis court would trigger their review, and we're subject to their approval. And that would include stormwater runoff review as well.
Okay.
And that would have to be a condition for if it's approved, right?
Correct.
That is
Mike-
correct. That is
Mike,
correct, Mr. Chairman. And any approval of this board, should they grant it, would obviously be subject to DNR Canal Commission approval.
Chicky Haynes, Mike, what's the size of the trees that you're going to be removing? And if runoff right now is something of an issue, by removing 20 trees, are you adding to the possible runoff onto your neighbors' properties?
Well, the applicant, we've discussed this with the applicant, and we anticipated the concerns about the trees. The applicant would be willing to replace the trees and filling, there would be existing trees at the perimeter of the property that would remain, and my hand's moving there, right here. And we would plant replacement trees in that area to provide screen as well as mitigate for the trees that would be disturbed.
What size trees are they? They can't be, are they comparable to what you'd be removing?
Now that the size of planting, I've been to the site, I've seen the site. I don't have a inventory of each size of tree, but they're not, I'll say, specimen trees, if you will, you know, greater than 20-inch caliper. But the size of the planting certainly wouldn't be the equivalent. We'd have to plant, you know, the standard size 3-inch caliper tree at the time of planting that would grow to greater size.
I had a question regarding the, and I apologize because I read through the report about the surface of the tennis court, but is there maintenance that is needed on that in order to keep it permeable, or, you know, through over time, or is it just once it's put down, the system is always permeable and there's not issues with it for maintenance?
I've actually dealt with a similar type of court at Nassau Racket and Tennis Club, you know, a permeable court. And over time, yes, there is maintenance. You will have to supplement material, but it's not a maintenance to restore permeability. The permeability would be there. The material is, it's a manufactured, you know, while a lot of people could refer this as a clay court, as described in the manufacturer's material, it's actually crushed stone granular, so that type of aggregate wouldn't change over time, so the permeability would be the same.
Mike, this is Phil again, Philomena. The question I have is that in the construction of the building of this tennis court, is it going to encumber any of the other properties as far as bringing in equipment or disturbing anything on their properties? And if so, how would that be handled?
Yeah, the answer is no, and the construction access would be off of the end of the existing driveway.
Okay,
I'm highlighting the existing driveway now, and it would be limited to the area, you know, basically the retaining wall in.
okay, thanks, Mike.
Any other questions? Because I have 2 or 3 for you, Mike.
Yeah, Mr. Herbert, Pat Gorman here.
Go
Mike, I have a few concerns about this application at this point, to be honest. There's nothing mentioned as part of your application sheet that there said there will be any tree removal. Will this be triggering anything in the tree mitigation ordinance? That will 20% of the trees be removed from the site, or something in the board that needs to seriously consider that wasn't a part of your notice or part of your application?
With a bulk variance for the impervious coverage exceedance.
No. About the tree the township's tree mitigation ordinance.
Right. No, I'm saying that as part of a variance application for impervious coverage exceedance, typically there's not a request for a tree mitigation plan too. That's really for a site plan. But to the extent we.
And Pat, this is Frank Linus. Our notice did incorporate any other variances that may arise during the course of the application or during the proceeding. So although if there's a variance required, it would seem to be covered by the catch-all provision in the notice.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mark Anderson. I do know that that is in Mr. Linus's notice. I believe that that has very limited value, really having to do with things that come up during the application in which the board is asking for changes. So if the board finds that that's significant, I think Mr. Gorman is correct, it creates notice problems. However, let me also say that I do not think that tree mitigation is a required notice issue.
So it could trigger a variance, but we don't have that information in front of us at this time.
Yes, I am not at all taking exception with what Mr. Gorman said.
Just pointing out the facts. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Mr. Linus.
Any more questions? Okay, Mike, I'm looking at the plan, and I can see you going the elevations of about 195 feet up to about 210 feet.
Yes.
What elevation is the surface of the tennis court going to be at?
That's at right at the middle of the tennis court. The existing elevation's about 202, 204. That's where the tennis court is at, the 204.
Okay, and that's how you get to your 6 feet retaining wall on one side and the 8 feet on the other side?
Right. We tried to match the existing grade at the middle of the court, so that would provide for the opportunity to get in and out of the court without the need for steps in and out. And then also that works well with the balancing of the grade with the cut on the south side and the filling on the north side.
Mm-hmm. Okay, okay. So visually, the neighbor to the right, like Jim had said, they're going to maybe see a 4-foot fence above the retaining wall.
Correct.
Okay, so the imposition is going to be to the neighbor to the left. That's going to be 17, 18 feet looking up from their property, right?
That's correct.
The top of the fence. Now, if you replace trees in the 16-foot between the property line and the tennis court, you only have 16 feet. You don't want the tree hanging over the neighbor's yard. So what type of vegetation or tree would you put in there that sort of block to help that view and also to fulfill the tree replacement requirement?
Well, we could plant a columnar tree, something that grows up straight up and not out, and it could be an evergreen tree to provide, the screen from the base up.
Okay, how many years would it take to sort of shield the high fence?
Evergreens grow at a different rate. The time of planting a typical evergreen is 6 feet high. So that would be basically the height of the retaining wall, and it would take some time to grow the additional feet to screen the fence, if you will.
Okay, but some period of time, maybe 10 years is possible to screen that fence then if it's objectionable.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so the other question I had, runoff is also stopped by vegetation, grass, for instance. So if this is a grass backyard and he's replacing it with the new surface, wouldn't the grass sort of impede the runoff or the trees that were there now?
Well, yes, but from a runoff standpoint, this permeability of this surface is very high. You know, I'm not going to call it grass because it's not green. It doesn't grow. It doesn't, you know, mow it. And then, like I've said, the fact that you put it in flat promotes the downward and not the lateral movement of the water that hits it.
Okay, so let's say Mr. Chang was a turf tennis player instead of a clay turf, and he just flattened his backyard and planted grass there. And I don't think he'd have to get a variance to do that. Which would have less runoff, the grass one that with this native soil, or this proposed one?
I'm not familiar with what the grass surface, and we've discussed this actually with the applicant. A grass surface is really not a desirable. Or
I understand. I'm just, okay, let's say you just wanted a clay court and you used the clay that's there, you just bulldozed it flat and you didn't put a surface, you didn't put the surface on. Would that have would that retain more water or less?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I don't know the answer, as a factual engineer, what the difference in runoff would be between a flat grass area and this surface. I don't.
How about a flat area? Let's say just flatten it out and didn't plant grass. It was just the soil that's there. Would he have more runoff under that condition or more runoff with the surface that he's proposing?
I would say with the flat surface, the soil, it would be more runoff from the soil, because our studies have shown that, for example, another analogy I'll use is a cultivated field where you often have periods of bare soil. The runoff from a bare soil area is higher than that same area with a grass surface.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So bottom line is saying this is not going to make it worse.
No, and like I said, the permeability is so high that you actually have to, maintain it by sprinkling water on it sometimes. And that 4 inch per hour permeability rate is excellent.
Right. Okay, and so my questions, Mr. Linus, I'm going to open it up for public questions unless you have any more.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Mark.
Mr. Ford, Mark Anderson, a couple of questions about your testimony. Let me just start with a clarification. You said earlier that talking about trees that would be disturbed. I take it by disturbed, you mean removed?
Correct.
Let me ask you a couple questions about the porosity of this proposed surface, because I observe in your presentation and also in the questions that are being asked by board members that seems to be a substantial issue. Do you have a personal knowledge about the porosity of this surface?
No, Mr. Anderson, I've already said, like, the documentation I'm referring to is documentation provided by the supplier of the tennis court surface.
So when you've said that the porosity is 4 inches per hour, you're simply reciting something that's in manufacturer's literature, correct?
That's all I'm simply doing.
Okay.
I haven't done any independent tests on myself, nor have I, gone to other locations where this is at and tested it. We're just referring to that documentation by the supplier.
So it would be fair to say on the issue of porosity that you're asking the board to take the word of somebody who's not testifying and is not under oath, correct?
Just stating what I said already factually. I'm not really, I think, asking or directing the board to do anything, just stating and referring to a document.
All right. I trust the board understands my point. Let me also ask a question about maintenance. A couple of times you've referred to the fact that this surface needs to be kept damp, as I understand it. Did I understand that correctly?
Correct.
What happens if it's not kept damp? And
It dries out and it wouldn't be a playable surface.
when I ask that question, I do want you to focus on whether this is something of your personal knowledge or again, something you're relating from manufacturer's literature.
This is from discussions with the applicant, Mr. Anderson, who's, familiar with this, and it becomes a playing surface problem. It's all about, it's just like putting lines or having the net at the right location.
You said at one point that, unless I misunderstood you, that if the surface dries out, it becomes dusty. Am I correct?
Correct.
So, I mean, if this is not maintained in terms of keeping it damp, then when the wind comes along, there will be dust. Am I correct?
It's not my understanding from discussions with the applicant again, that this is a type of dust that blows away. It's a dust that you can't play on.
Mr. Ford, this is your testimony. If the applicant needs to testify something, we should take that. But
okay, then I would defer Mr. Anderson to the first witness to answer that question.
So we'll bring back Mr. Chang after Mr. Ford.
You understand my point, that we shouldn't be taking hearsay. Frankly, what concerned me when you mentioned that is that this could potentially become a maintenance issue and, in fact, something of a nuisance. You understand, I'm certain, and I trust the board understands that if this variance is granted, it's permanent. I have little doubt that Mr. Chang and his family would maintain this properly, but at some point, every property is going to be owned by someone else. None of us are going to live forever. So I ask the question because the tennis court may be there for many years in the ownership of somebody who does not and perhaps doesn't have a desire to maintain it. But those are my questions, and I appreciate your candor as usual, Mr. Ford.
Frank, I have one additional along the same line. Mike, if you know what type, I'm assuming it's an artificial material, what is the material that makes up this material, the surface of the court?
In the literature we provided, they describe it as a crushed stone. So like you or might be familiar with 3/4 inch, stone that you see. This is stone that's very small particles.
Okay, but some kind of adhesive is used to adhere it to some kind of a surface?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions?
Yeah, I had it, and I honestly don't know if Mike really is the one to answer, though. It is about the height of the fence. So I know it's being proposed that at that one far side, it's 17 feet high. Is that, I just don't, I tried to find on in the township information what the maximum height of a fence was in the neighborhood, and I couldn't find that. Does that not cause issues for the height of a fence to be that high in the neighborhood, in a residential area?
Patrick, maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, I can field this question. Basically, you're looking at comparing here where you have a fencing, but it's going to be associated with an accessory use. The township doesn't really have fencing guidelines in the residential zones for maximum height, but when you associate this as part of this project and with the retaining wall, we should keep with the standard at 1.5 times height setback.
4.5 times. Okay, so what is that? Do you know what that is offhand, Patrick? I'm trying to figure out.
Sure. I don't I don't have that information for you at the moment. The applicant should be the one providing that information as there's grade changes and such on this property.
And I don't think I saw the 10, but is that change with this testimony? I didn't see 17 feet. So does that change it from what we were given?
It could.
I mean, the fence is still 10 feet. It's just sitting on its top of a 7-foot retaining wall, which makes.
Sure, but it's still, yeah, I understand that, but it's still in visual height, 17.
Right, no, that's why I was asking, okay.
Yeah.
So the side yard is about a little over 16 feet. Patrick, you say you can have a fence that's 4 times height, it'd be a 64-foot fence.
1.5 times the height.
1.5, okay, so.
Because it's being used in association now with as part of his tennis court.
Okay, so that'd be 24 feet it would be permitted total.
Ay, ay, ay.
Okay, any more questions? I'll open it to public if not. Jim, would you open up the public lines? And at this point, any of the public listening in, if you have questions for this witness, this is the time to answer them, please. Patrick,
Mike, is there a possibility of you just temporarily minimizing your share screen?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have Susan Gilliford.
Okay, Susan Gulliford, Hunt Club Road. I have a question. Mr. Euro's letter of January 3rd, 2020, item number 5 on page 2, he refers to a proposed sidewalk surrounding the tennis court, and I'm having trouble seeing that on your exhibit because it's on this tiny little monitor. Is that still on there? How big is that? Would that be regular cement?
Yeah, no, it was just, I'll say, a graphical misinterpretation. There's no sidewalk around the tennis court. That's like the little strip of stone at the perimeter of the tennis court.
Okay, so it would just be stone that water would drain through. It's not like a cement sidewalk.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello? Hello?
Yes.
My name is Virginia Sprague. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to the board. My husband and I live at 213 Duval Road for the past 36 years, and my yard backs up to 9 Starview, where they're going to build, where they'd like to build this proposed tennis court.
Can I stop you, ma'am? Can I stop you for a moment? I'm asking for questions for this witness, and you're going to have a chance to, talk to the board when the witnesses are finished.
Okay, all right, that's fine. I thought it was my turn. I'll be quiet.
At this point, the engineer just made his testimony. So if you have any questions about what we've been talking about for the last 20, 30 minutes, this is your time.
Well, I do have questions. I'd like to just speak at the end of the meeting before you make your decision.
Okay, well, like I'm saying, now's the time to ask the expert witness that we have on the stand if you have.
Well, no, it's not for the expert witness. I just saw, I read that really tennis courts should be on a minimum of 1.5 acres of land. Now, the lot behind me, 9 Starview, is under 1 acre, and I'm at 213. I back up to him. I'm under 1 acre. So maybe if we had the 2 lots together, it would be large enough to accommodate this tennis court.
Ms. Bray, is that a question of the witness? Because
yeah. Do they usually put tennis courts on such a small property?
Okay, I think that's a fair question. Whether the witness can answer it or not, I don't know, but that's certainly a fair question.
Yeah, I don't have an answer.
Yeah, you don't. How many tennis courts are built on these small properties?
7,000 square
feet. I don't know how many. I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is very unusual.
Okay, so anybody else from the public have a question for this witness? Okay, ma'am, again, when we're finished with the next witness, you'll have an opportunity to, express your opinion to the board.
Yeah, no, yeah, I have a few things I'd just like to bring up at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the public that wish to make a question for the witness? Okay, Jim, you can unmute the lines. I guess, Mr. Lennis, we're ready for your next witness.
Right. Before I call my final witness, I'd like to recall Mr. Chang to ask Mr. Chang a few questions regarding questions that were not answered by Mr. Ford.
Good.
All right, Dan, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, and you remain under oath. You understand that?
Yes.
Okay, great. One of the questions from the board members related to tree disturbance. If this board were to approve this particular application, are you willing to submit a landscaping buffer plan satisfactory to the board planner or whoever might be making that determination on behalf of the board?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you also heard Mr. Anderson talk about maintenance issues, and Mr. Ford could not fully answer the question regarding maintenance. Do you want to first describe what the maintenance would be and what the consequences would be on the failure to maintain this type of surface on the tennis court?
Mr. Linus, before your client answers that question, let me remind the board that the question may call for expert testimony. Mr. Chang certainly needs to tell the board the basis for whatever information he's about to give the board. Is this?
Right. I agree, Mr. Anderson. I agree, Mr. Anderson. Right now, he's testifying as to facts, and if he departs from that, then he'll have to qualify as some type of expert.
If he's testifying as to what the maintenance is to be, I do not see how that's a fact.
All right, let me then ask a few preliminary questions. Mr. Chang, are you aware of any maintenance requirements for this particular product on this particular tennis court?
There is an annual maintenance that is typically done.
What's the source of your information?
I'm quite familiar with the surface because I've played on the surface at many tennis clubs.
Okay, so the surface that you're proposing this evening before the board, you've actually played on many surfaces.
Yes.
Okay. And what type of maintenance do you believe is required?
Mr. Lynn, how do we get from one to the other? How do we get from the fact that he's familiar with playing on the surface to an understanding of what the maintenance is?
I think it goes to the weight of his testimony, Mr. Anderson. I don't think he necessarily has to qualify as an expert to testify as to his personal observations and personal familiarity with the maintenance requirements of this particular product.
Well, actually, I don't think I disagree with that. Obviously, the board has to decide the weight for themselves, but I have not heard that he has a personal observation. I've heard only that he has played on the surface. So I haven't heard anything to indicate that he has personal observation of the maintenance.
Well, we haven't gotten to that question yet.
Well, you have asked that question, so without the background. So maybe we need to get the background first.
Would you describe your personal observation of this particular product and the maintenance requirements of this particular product?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Observations. You said that you've observed, you've played on other tennis courts with this particular product.
Right, and I've talked to the club owners of those courts, and they've discussed with me the maintenance that's required for this type of court.
So your testimony, I take it, is.
Mr. Linus, let me speak, please. I remind the board and the witness that the board is not precluded from taking hearsay as long as it believes it's reliable, but this is hearsay. So what the question that's being answered is based on hearsay. That does not preclude the board from hearing the testimony.
I'm in agreement with that. The municipal land use law has a specific provision which allows the board to consider hearsay. All right, Mr. Chang, would you go on with your answer, please?
Yeah, so speaking with club owners who have this type of court, they've told me the type of maintenance that's that's required for it. And it's really just an annual maintenance.
Mr. Chang, you're sort of fading.
Yeah, you're kind of breaking up, Dan. You want
Hey,
to?
can you still hear me?
Yeah, but that's much better.
Okay, yeah. So talking with the club owners who have this type of court, I mean, they've told me that it's really just an annual maintenance that's required. And if you want me to go into further detail, I can do that. But
What is your understanding of the annual maintenance required?
so you need to break up the surface like by a rake, and then every few years you need to mend it by adding a little more surface, and you also need to roll it flat, and then you need to nail down the lines. So during the wintertime, you take up the lines, which is made of some sort of tape, and then in the springtime, you nail it back down again.
Do you have any understanding as to what would happen in the event you do not perform annual maintenance?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Do you have any understanding from any source as to what would happen if you do not perform the annual maintenance?
I'm not aware. I mean, I'm sure it's still going to be a playable court. I can't say for sure.
Okay. All right, those are the only questions I have of Mr. Chang at this
Well,
point.
let me ask Mr. Chang a question. So let's say in the future you move away and the next owner is not a tennis player and the tennis court just sits there. You know, what would happen to it? Would it just fall apart or, you know?
I'm not completely sure. But I can say for sure that we don't have any plans to move away. I mean, we really love our neighborhood.
No, I'm sure you do, but I'm just curious, you know, eventually 10, 20 years, even the public ones around town that need to be, you know, fall apart after a while. So what happens as this deteriorates over time?
I can't say for sure. I've never seen a court that hasn't been maintained.
You know, this is Philomena Salili. I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, well, we have your opinion, which I perceive to be rather general in that you have spoken to owners of the courts and they have explained to you without being repetitive what would happen if. I'm not even sure if credibility were significant enough if you would name those people that you spoke to who are professionals in this area and bring it up to a higher level. This kind of really concerns me. I'm wondering if it would be beneficial as we consider the entire application to bring an expert witness in to answer what seems to be my concern, and I'm not sure about the other members of the board. I mean, when I hear I've spoken to several people or a couple of people who have had experience, and this is what they shared with me. I don't know, it just makes me a little bit uncomfortable, quite candidly.
Yeah.
Mr. Lennis, this is Pat Gorman speaking.
Hi, Pat.
Mr. Lennis, in the material that you've given to the board, there is an owner user's manual as part of this, and then part of it goes into spring opening, care of the surface, top dressing, rolling, controlling growth on the courts, and other data sheets. This labeled owner's manual prepared by Modified Hydro Court. I'm sorry. Prepared by, I guess, the engineering company in Virginia who does the hard true surfacing.
Prepared by the engineering company, what?
I'm trying to get their name. One second, please. Their name is, I'm just going through the materials at the moment.
I am as well, Patrick. This is Philomena Salili again. I am as well, and I did prior to, and I don't have anything in my packet that I'm looking with you as to in terms of what we have as our information.
Yeah, it's there's an owner user's manual.
Do we have that, Patrick?
You should.
Okay, I'm a looking.
When I look at it, I'm just gonna play devil's advocate for an instant. We've approved a lot of pools over the years, and we've never asked the pool owners, what they were gonna do maintenance wise and what would happen 20, 30 years from now if the pool fell apart. We've approved a lot of houses, and we never asked the people what would happen if they didn't paint their house. So I don't know if we're being overly difficult on the maintenance thing with this tennis court.
I respectfully disagree with that, Frank. I don't think we are.
Okay, I'm just throwing it out there.
I think what Mr. Gorman, this is Frank Linus, I think what Mr. Gorman may be referring to you is something that was submitted with the application entitled Owner Users Manual. Is that what you're referring to, Pat?
Correct. I just can't identify a company that prepared it. There was an address at the bottom, phone number, but I don't see anyone's name tied to it.
We definitely have it as a part of this, part of the Hard True package. It's in the back half.
Hard True, Bob Euro, Hard True Sports is the one who prepared that owner's manual.
That's why I assumed, Bob. I just didn't want to say anything before I saw it in writing myself.
With regard to the maintenance, is it something that has to be done by a company, somebody special, or is it something that the homeowner or the tennis would be able to do on their own? And what is that plan? I guess I'm asking that of David, the homeowner, or Daniel, sorry.
So you're asking if I plan to do the maintenance myself or hire it out?
Yeah, is that like, what is the protocol? Or is it something that needs to be done professionally, or is it something that you are able to do and, sorry, I have dogs, know how to do and plan to do on your own? What's the protocol for the maintenance?
It can be done either way. Personally, I prefer to have a professional do it, but they do sell the equipment to do it on your own. It's just a roller, a rake, a hammer and nails to nail down the lines. I want my lines straight. That's why I prefer to have a professional do it.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. And also David, I'm sorry, I keep calling you Daniel, while I have you on, just out of curiosity, time of play, I know you said there would be no lighting, so I'm assuming that time of play would be during regular daylight hours, not early morning hours, just for your use, just out of curiosity.
I don't plan on making any enemies out of my neighbors, so if people are sleeping, I don't plan to be playing.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Linus?
Yes, I have one final witness, and that would be Kevin O'Brien. Are you still here, Kevin? You're muted, Kevin.
I am here, Mr. Linus.
Can we swear Mr. O'Brien in, please, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, got it. Mr. O'Brien, can you raise your right hand?
Yes,
Is your right hand raised?
yes,
Do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, the witness is sworn. Mr. Linus, you can continue.
Can you hear me properly? Too loud, too low?
You're perfect.
Thank you.
And I don't say that to men usually.
I'll tell my wife.
Mr. O'Brien, would you give the board and members of the public the benefit of your educational, professional qualifications, background, and experience?
Yes, good evening. In Somerset County, I've appeared in Bedminster, Branchburg, Bridgewater, Franklin, Greenbrook, North Plainfield, and Warren, as well as the fair town of Hillsborough. I've appeared before about 250 municipalities in the state. I teach planning and zoning for Rutgers University at the Center for Government Services for the New Jersey Association of Planning and Zoning Administrators.
We can accept his qualifications.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, just one question. You do have a professional planner's license and it is current. Is that correct, Kevin?
I have a current license, which is in good standing. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Were you engaged by the applicant, Mr. Chang, to prepare a planning and zoning analysis surrounding the variance requested?
Yes, I was.
All right, you want to detail that for the board and the public, please?
Certainly. We are here tonight, as the board knows, to seek an impervious cover variance, which would allow the tennis court to be constructed in the rear yard. No other bulk variances are requested. The proposed tennis court meets all the required setbacks. There are a number of unique aspects to this application. And as the board knows, in considering the request for a variance, that we've got to prove that there are unique circumstances. The property currently has a 13.17% impervious cover, where 15% is allowed. The proposed tennis court is 7,000 square feet, surrounded by a fence, and the proposed lot cover is 30.7%. This isn't allowed use in the zone, as are other recreational uses. The proposed tennis court is porous. You've read that the Environmental Commission estimated that the court has an average permeability of 4 inches per hour. You've just heard Mr. Ford's testimony discussing how this court will not add to stormwater runoff. And in fact, this will take care of all the stormwater that lands on the court itself. Tennis is an important part of the applicant's life. The Changs met through tennis, as you've heard, play the game regularly. Today's environment is also a unique one, as represented by the fact we're all sitting here before a computer screen instead of meeting in town hall. Due to COVID, recreational facilities have been closed for some time. Few are available, and fewer still are completely safe to go to. USA Today on April 30th, 2020, called tennis, quote, conducive to social distancing, unquote, and stated that when the sport is played outdoors, participants are typically 60 feet away from each other. USA Today went on to state that, quote, tennis might be the safest sport around that combines competition and cardiovascular exercise, unquote. Placing a tennis court in their backyard enables the Changs to play tennis without any fear. Only the family will utilize the court, as you have heard, making it a very safe recreational activity, particularly today with the coronavirus. There are a number of other private recreational facilities in the area. Looking at Starview Drive and nearby parts of Murray Drive, Emerald Road, Ski Drive, and Duval Road. Altogether, there are 44 homes in that area. 16 of them, or 36%, have pools, another allowed recreational use. So this recreational use is common in the area. The master plan does have language which supports recreational and residential use. The 1996 master plan goals and objectives on page 6 state, quote, provide a balance of land uses that include recreation and residential. Goes on to say, provide housing types to serve all ages, economic segments, and family sizes. The 2002 master plan reexamination in the goals and objectives on page 7 expand that first statement by saying, provide a future land use pattern that includes recreation, residential, and a safe and healthful environment. The 2005 master plan repeats those goals on page 35. These goals for development have been consistent since 1996, providing a balance of land uses, a variety of housing, which will meet all types of needs. This application supports these goals by providing for different types of housing to meet the needs of Hillsborough residents, and supports the residential use and encourages recreation. There has been some comments about what will happen to this tennis court with a future buyer. And I think that one can say it will be similar to a pool in that a future buyer is going to be looking at a house which has a tennis court on it. They will have to assume those responsibilities for that court. I personally think that this is going to be a very limited market because that tennis court is going to narrow the number of people who are going to be interested in the property. But I can't see why, in most circumstances, why someone would spend the additional money on a property to get a recreational facility that they would not be using. I believe that this application also supports the purposes of the municipal land use law. Item A, to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands in this state in a manner which will promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. And this this application promotes the public health and general welfare by providing a recreational space. To secure safety from flood, item B, and the permeability of the court reduces and slows stormwater runoff. Item C, to provide adequate light, air, and open space. And the tennis court itself provides light, air, and open space. Item G, to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of residential, recreational, and open space uses. And I believe this proposal will provide recreational space behind a residence, which is particularly suited since it is an allowed accessory use. So I do believe that the application is consistent with those passages from the municipal land use law. In terms of negative impact, I cannot identify any negative impacts. There has been discussion on the part of the board about the fence and the height of the retaining wall. I heard one estimated approximately 17 feet. 10 feet arborvitae are typically available. I have occasionally seen 12-footers available. They grow at approximately 1 foot per year. So if the highest available arborvitae or a similar planting were placed alongside the property line, this would screen the fence within a few years. The tennis court will not be visible from the street, and I don't believe, other than that visual, which can be corrected, there will be no negative impact upon nearby properties. In order for the board to grant a C bulk variance application, we must meet the positive and negative criteria. The positive criteria are met because the application meets the goals of the municipal land use law in items A, B, C, and G. The application meets the goals of the master plan by providing a housing type that serves a particular segment of the population, provides recreation and a safe and healthful environment. Other benefits include improved stormwater management, and a family will be able to participate in their favorite sport in a safe and healthy way, which is very important these days. The negative criteria are met in this proposal. The tennis court will have no negative impact on nearby homes, other than what we discussed in terms of the visual, which is correctable. This use is particularly suited for this location because it meets all other ordinance requirements. In conclusion, I believe that this application can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantial impairment to the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. Mr. Linus, did you have any further questions?
I have no further questions.
Any questions?
Frank, I have one, I'd like to ask for clarification. Mr. Bryan, I think near the beginning of your report, you said something to the effect that the Environmental Commission said that the permeability was about 4 inches per hour. That's not the case. They mentioned that the applicant and his representative provided that information. So it was not the Environmental Commission that was providing that, it was the applicant. So if that's what you said, I just want to clarify that point.
Thank you for the clarification. You are correct. I am reading it from the Environmental Commission report of the 7th of February, 2020.
Right, and it said that the applicant and his representative presented that information, not that the Environmental Commission determined it.
Certainly, and the commission did go on to conclude, quote, "The commission notes the permeability of the court should not be a problem relative to runoff to adjacent properties."
Yes, but it did not provide that, if you want to call it technical information. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have questions? I have one. Okay, so you, in describing the zone, you said certain recreational things are permitted on your property, including pools, right?
Yes.
Okay, and I noticed that the neighbor next door has a pool, so you're saying this is really the equivalent, the neighbor has a pool, you know, you should be able to have his tennis court?
Well, they're both allowed uses. They're both allowed accessory uses, pools, tennis courts. So whether one has one particular type of recreational use or another, the ordinance makes no distinction.
Okay, so a tennis court is in the ordinance then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. More questions? In that case, I'll open up questions from the public for this witness. Jim, would you open lines again?
Okay, and Frank, what I'm going to do, because I really can't open everyone, but I will recite either the last 4 digits of the phone number. So people, I guess, want to speak about this specific thing, so to speak. So there's a phone caller with 0413. So if they have anything related to the task that's at hand now, I can unmute them.
How would you know if they're muted?
Well, they're all muted to begin with.
I know, but how can they tell you they want to speak if they're muted?
Well, hopefully, well, even though they're muted, they can hear me talking.
You know, but how do they tell us they want to talk? I think you really need to go down and ask them, you know, open.
Yeah, let's see.
Hey, person's phone number ends with 7434. Do you have anything to ask this witness?
No, I'm waiting for your next case.
Okay.
So I'm going to mute. We're going to go down to 7434.
It's slow, isn't it?
Hello?
Yes.
I don't have a question. I have a statement I wanted to read, and I don't know when.
Right, okay. Okay, so you're going to have the opportunity to read it after we're finished with these witnesses.
All right, then I'll wait.
Okay. Next.
Hello, this is, my name is Jyoti Agarwal. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so I reside at 211 Duval Road, and I have a question for the gentleman that presented last. In terms of, in reference to your overall presentation to go ahead and approve this application, I was wondering the absence of the Delaware River Commission, I don't know what the exact acronym is, but regarding the planting of trees, how does that kind of a pending activity get accounted for in this process?
Yes, ma'am. The typical routine in these cases is that should the board grant this application, that an application will then be made to the Delaware Canal, and they will review it. And if they have any conditions that they place on it, then they would be free to do that.
So that approval would not then be subject to public review. At that point, if they say that we are okay with them not planting any trees, and then it passes as such.
Well, that would depend upon the final decision of this board and the applicant as to what they agree on should the application be considered favorably.
Okay, so there would be one more level of review once the Delaware River Canal has gone through this review.
That's correct. And should the board make a decision this evening or at a subsequent meeting and place conditions on the application, then those conditions would have to be met in any referral to the Canal Commission.
Okay. Very well. And I do have one more question. I'm not sure if you are the appropriate individual or this is the appropriate time, but you can tell me otherwise. In terms of the court, the use of the court itself, I think I heard that no lighting is going to be installed. And is that correct?
That is my understanding, but I would defer to Mr. Ford if he could confirm that, please.
Let's come back to him after. But Mr. Ford did testify there would be no lighting. If we could jump skip it.
Okay. Very well. Then let me just quickly follow up. So,
Matter of fact, we're gonna make it a condition if we go ahead that there's no lighting. So.
Not only
so
that,
when you,
not only that, Mr. Chairman, but it is not on the plan, nor is it proposed.
Right.
right. So my question though is in terms of lighting, when you make that a condition, does that lighting condition go specifically on the structure, meaning the fenced area, or can you, my neighbor go ahead and put additional lighting on the side of their home so that it reflects upon the court? So it serves the purpose of lighting of the court, but technically it's not on the court. The reason I ask is because we're abutting the property, and due to the lack of vegetation, we do have, we can get direct light coming straight from our neighbor to our yard. And with all the trees that have been lost recently in the storms, that is a concern.
Ma'am, the distance between the rear of the house and the tennis court is fairly considerable. I've got it on my screen, so I can't scale it off. If Mr. Ford's around, maybe he can give us a number. But if not, lighting on the back of a house is not going to serve a tennis court some distance away. That light would have to basically be down facing within the court to give it visibility.
We can come back to Mr. Ford with that question. So.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. But thank you for that. That helps.
Okay.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Linus.
That concludes the affirmative presentation.
Okay. I think we want to come back to Mike Ford certainly about that last question.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, if the board were to approve this with condition of no lighting of the tennis court, then that means functionally no lighting of the tennis court. If lighting were put up, regardless of where it is in the future, it would be up to the zoning officer to determine whether functionally that serves the prohibited purpose.
Yeah, no, I just want to hear from Mike because, people put lights on their house all the time for their patios and stuff like that. And I'd like to hear from Mike, what type of light they'd have to put on the house to actually be functional for a tennis court that far away.
Yeah, the Mike Ford back. I've listened to everything so far. I just turned off my video to not have people have to stare at my office. The answer is yes. There's no lighting proposed as part of this application. The distance from the back of the house to the tennis court is approximately 50 feet. And my experience on other tennis court projects, including public tennis courts, is the level of lighting intensity in order to sustain tennis play would have to be significant. So even a spotlight on the back of a house is not going to be adequate. In fact, this board considered an application for a tennis court on a residential property on Montgomery Road, Puleo, about 5-6 years ago, which indeed did propose lighting. And that was right at the tennis court, mounted downlit, like has been described, and intense. So again, there's no lighting proposed, and it doesn't seem practical that any lighting mounted on the house would be adequate to sustain tennis play.
Thank you. Okay, we finished with questions. I'll open up for public comment then. At this point, anybody in the public have a statement to make, please, take this opportunity to speak to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I remind the members of the public who may want to speak to this that if they want their comments considered by the board, they must be sworn and testify under oath.
Okay. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Virginia Sprague, and I'd like to make my comments, and I'll
Okay.
be
We need to swear in like like Ms. Anderson said. So Tina, would you swear this?
Yes, Miss Sprague, can you please raise your right hand?
Yes.
Is your right hand raised?
Yes, it is.
Do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, can you just spell your last name for me?
Yes, S-P-R-A-G-U-E.
Thank you. You may proceed.
All right, I'm the property owner at 213 Duval Road. I've lived there for the past 36 years, and my yard backs up to 9 Starview. I received notice of this meeting on August 22nd, and it was the first time I received notice that they were planning on putting in a 7,000 square foot tennis court with a 10-foot high chain link fence, they said at the time, and that they were increasing the pervious coverage to 30%, which is more than doubling it. I did a little research, and it said typically homes with less than 1.5 acres of land really don't have the space required to install a tennis court. Now, both of our lots are undersized. We're each under 1 acre. And I feel this variance is going to negatively affect me. And my first concern is with the request to double the impervious coverage. I've already have water issues at certain times of the year in both my front and backyard. There are times in my yard when I can't walk without my feet sinking down below the grass up to my ankles in mud. Because of this, we've left the very back of our property in the natural state. That's the property that is closest to 9 Starview Drive. We do not walk on it. We don't mow it to prevent further erosion from the water that flows down after heavy rains, after snow melts, or during the spring thaw from above the hill. This problem has gotten worse over the past 36 years. I don't know why, but I sometimes think it's because they increased the number of homes built up higher on the hill. This added flow has been a concern of mine for a while, so much so that I purchased flood insurance a few years ago. I don't live in a floodplain, but out of concern that water was coming closer to my home and for fear of the water coming up through our basement floor, I made the purchase of flood insurance. I'm currently covered. We've left as many trees as possible when our house was built in 1984. But over the years, we only removed trees that were diseased because I know they help with the water absorption and with preventing erosion of our property. Where these trees were removed, we did try to replace them without success. I believe this was due to the wet ground conditions. The new trees that we did plant would die within the year. If this variance for a tennis court is approved, several trees will have to be removed, and that is a concern of mine, since this may cause the water and the soggy ground to be closer to my home. These old trees that are here have somehow miraculously adapted to the harsh conditions on our hill, and losing these trees may cause more water issues, and they'll also detract from the beauty of this area. As it is now, I have a lawn person. He does not ride a tractor on our property because many times during the season, the tractor would get stuck in the mud. He walks a self-propelled mower. Any increase in water, any at all, will negatively affect me. When I received the letter about the variance, I was so concerned about the water issue that I did not give much thought until later on about the aesthetic impact of a 10-foot chain link fence with canvas spread across the back of my property, back of the property at 9 Starview. But our property is not deep, so this fence will be clearly visible from our deck. In fact, people driving up our street in cars will have a partial view of this fence. This 10-foot, and really, I found out this evening it's going to be much higher than 10-foot, industrial-looking chain fence does not fit in with the character of the area and will negatively affect the value of my property. My husband and I did get to meet Daniel Chang and his lovely wife. They stopped over on the 28th, and during the conversation, he said he would have plantings along the 10-foot fence. The problem is that new plants look great when they're first planted here, but do not survive more than a year, if that, due to the water conditions on this hill, and I know this from experience. I also know from experience, if the water does not kill the new plantings, the deer will. We will end up without a natural buffer between our property and their, whatever it is, 16-foot high chain link fence. I do understand that the Changs love the game of tennis, but I hope they understand I love my home, and we are very concerned about the negative impact this project will have on us and on our property value due to the water conditions, the loss of the trees, and natural beauty due to the 10-foot high industrial-looking fence with canvas, which will spread across the back of my property, entirely visible from my deck and from every window at the back of our home. I remember when the municipal building was in planning stages and how concerned everyone was about the aesthetics of the project and how it appeared to those passing by or visiting the building. And I totally agreed. And now I have those same concerns regarding my home and property. And that is another reason why I'm against the approval of this variance. Thank you for allowing me to express my concerns. I appreciate it.
All right, Ms. Sprague, is it Ms. Sprague?
Yes.
All right, this is Frank Linus. I represent the applicant. I have a few questions for you, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, number one, you heard Mr. Anderson indicate to the board, and I agreed with him, that before one could provide expert testimony, one would have to qualify as an expert. Are you stating that you are an expert with respect to the size of properties that can safely house tennis courts?
No, I'm not an expert at all. In fact, I asked the question earlier, how many people put these tennis courts on undersized lots, and I didn't get an answer.
What is an undersized lot?
Well, what I read on the line, they say usually 1.5 acres is the usual size. I'm not an expert on it, but I just know a 7,000 square foot tennis court behind my property is going to take up almost my entire yard, the view.
All right, let's stick with the source of your information. You say it's online? Is that where your
Yeah.
information is?
Yeah, where did I get it? I'll tell you. It was Classic Turf LLC. It said typically homes with less than 1.5 acres of land will not have the space required to install a tennis court. I even made a copy of it. I have it somewhere.
And who is Classic Turf LLC?
I don't know. A company
no
that
idea.
builds
Okay.
courts.
Now, the other issue you raised was drainage.
Yes.
Are you an expert in drainage?
No, just I know when I walk in mud.
Okay. And you heard that this is a request for an impervious coverage variance, which of course involves drainage implications. So I take it you're not accepting the testimony of Mr. Ford, and you're not accepting the testimony regarding the impervious coverage variance. Is that correct, as it relates to drainage?
Say that. I'm just telling you what I'm concerned about on my property. Okay. I'm not an expert. I'm just telling you my concerns.
All right. And the third item that you wanted covered or addressed is the aesthetic issue. Now,
yes.
the 10-foot fence is the fence that would be in the rear yard of Mr. Chang's property. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So your property does not face or abut the fence that could be as high as 17 feet. Is that correct?
Yes, my property runs along Mr. Chang's property. I'm directly behind him.
Okay. And I think you stated that Mr. Chang visited with you and offered to provide you with plantings and buffering on his property to help screen the fence. Is that correct?
He said he would have put in plantings. We didn't get into size or anything like that. I just told you my experience with my plantings and how the deer destroy them if the water doesn't kill them.
Okay. And the deer would destroy any plantings. Is that correct? Whether they're planted by Mr. Chang or by you?
I don't know. I don't know if the deer, I don't know what the deer are going to destroy.
Okay.
I just know my experience with what we had planted.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Is your backyard, are you lower or the same elevation as Mr. Chang's?
I think we're just a little bit lower. We're on the hill. I think we're on the low side.
So if there was runoff, you think it would run off from his property to yours?
Oh, yes, I do. Where else would it go?
Well, it could go to the downhill. You could go to the left, because I'm looking at the map, the elevation map that the applicant, it looks like the elevations are about the same across your properties, but I can't, it doesn't go far enough.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I think he's higher than me.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ford, can you provide any information in that regard? Mike, you still there? Mike, you're muted.
Patience,
Let's not switch witnesses, please. Let's move on with what the chairman has asked for, which is public comment.
Sorry. Okay,
Yeah, we'll come back to you, I guess, because she raised a good point. Okay, so is there anybody else in the public that wants to address, make a comment tonight to the board? Is everybody, Jim, does everybody have the ability to do that right now?
I'm asking just from people to unmute, but no one has responded.
Right now, I see 9 people on there, and it looks like they're all muted except for 2 people.
Yes, hi, this is Jyoti Agarwal. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I reside at 211 Duval Road, and I agree with a lot of what Virginia Sprague just read to the board. I live right next to her.
The witness should be sworn.
Yeah, I think so. Would you, Tina, would you swear in the witness, please?
Yes, ma'am. Can you raise your right hand, please?
Sure.
Is your right hand
Yes.
raised?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give this board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you please just state your name again, spelling your last?
Sure. The last name is spelled Agarwal.
And your first name was again, I'm sorry?
I'll spell that for you as well. That's Jyoti.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Great, thank you. So as I was saying, I agree with what Virginia Sprague has expressed in her statement that she just read to the board. We have had a lot of water logging issues in the back. In fact, there's a storm drain ditch that runs on my property, which is where all of the runoff from up on the hill comes down and then further drains downstream. So I understand Mr. Ford's testimony regarding the permeability of the soils is actually better than the native soils, which would mean that the ground would allow that flow, which would mean it would increase and come through our storm drains. So it actually allows for the drainage. However, we do have based on the kind of vegetation that's in the back, we do have a lot of water logging. And if I am correct, I think the property behind us, and I'm not sure if it's Mr. Chang's or his neighbor, there is some wetland type of grass, like a Phragmites type of grass that grows, which actually helps in removing the water and evaporating it from the soils into the atmosphere. So a concern regarding vegetation and the type of vegetation is what I'd like to make a note of. What gets put in place of the 20 trees that get removed is going to be of importance from a water balance perspective in this watershed. And then lastly, as far as aesthetics are concerned, I did not realize how tall that fence was going to be, and hearing that 17-foot number is a concern. I do appreciate that Mr. Chang and his family would like to be able to use their property the way they want to. After all, they have the right to. However, not providing a screen from that structure for the neighbors and the neighboring property is an issue. So the size of the vegetation that goes in, the number of trees and the kind of trees and their growth rate is going to be of significance when you consider this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else is any? Hey, Jim, is there somebody else trying to talk?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Virginia Sprague again. Even if Mr. Chang does put in the vegetation and it lasts for a year or two, which it would be wonderful if it did, and then it dies off, then where does it leave me in the back, facing that chain link fence?
Patrick, is that an enforcement issue? Patrick?
He's muted.
Patrick, you're muted.
My apologies. Okay. Sorry about that. It depends on what how the resolution states it as a condition of approval.
Okay, so what would the condition be? That he has to replace in 5 years, 10? What would the condition look like?
I can't offer an expertise in that. It'd be for a variety of factors of what the board would want to consider at that point and what the buffer is serving. Essentially, it's serving as a visual buffer in this sense from the fence or retaining wall. I'm not sure how it'll be impacting also the drainage or anything else on the property in contribution with this. It needs to be clarified as part of the resolution that they must maintain the tree line buffer as per plan. I'm not sure if we can put that onto a homeowner. I defer to Mark for a little bit more advice on conditions.
Okay, any other public members of the public that would like to address us?
If not, Frank, I make a motion to close the public portion.
Okay, motion. Those in
I'll
favor?
second it. This is Philomena. I'll second it.
Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, public's closed. Discussion from the board.
Before we get to discussion from the board, Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully request that Mike Ford have an opportunity to respond to some of the issues raised by the neighbors.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, certainly the board would like to allow Mr. Ford to be recalled. That's entirely proper. But I do point out that if there is further testimony, you will have to go through opening to the public again.
Okay, and you'll remind me, right?
I will do so, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ford.
All right, Mike, I'd like you to address a couple of the issues that were raised by a couple of the public, the ones relating to drainage and location of property and whose property is higher than whose ever property. And then I'd also like you to address the issue as to the height of the fence and why it must be or not must be 10 feet high surrounding the tennis court.
Okay. With regards to the drainage and where it's directed to, the topography of this site has runoff draining from the right side of the property to the left side of the property as you face it, or from the south side of the property to the north side of the property. And runoff is going to run in the direction of the greatest slope or the steepest slope. And our steepest slope is that 10% across from side to side of the property. So while a neighbor might be slightly lower in elevation, behind us, the runoff is going to be directed toward the steepest slope, which is that side to side slope. So it wouldn't be toward our rear. With regards to the fence is standard around tennis courts. Obviously, a stray ball is kept within the area of play.
All right, but with respect to the fence, the 17-foot total height of the retaining wall and then a 10-foot fence on top of a 7-foot retaining wall, would not the same be accomplished by a lesser height fence since it's sitting on top of the retaining wall?
Well, no, the fence at that location is at the perimeter of the tennis court, so it would keep balls from going out of the area of play. So the 10-foot fence is required at that location and necessary.
Okay, is it necessary that the fence be located on top of the retaining wall?
Yes.
Why?
Because that location of the retaining wall is on the downslope side of the property. Frank, that's so the court is above the grade beyond the fence.
Okay, I have no further questions.
I have a question of Mike. Is Chicky, are you telling us that even though the primary slope would be from south to north, that no water in a heavy rain or a period of several days of heavy rain is going to flow onto the properties there on DeBow, since they are lower?
Because the drainage or the runoff is going to follow the steepest slope. It's not going to go.
I understand that, but when you have heavy, rain, either over a period of days, or as you've seen, when we've had these, thunderstorms that just drop a lot of rain in a short period of time, that no water is going to flow from the back onto these lower properties.
Zero is not probably appropriate, but the path of the drainage on this site is going to follow the slope, the strongest slope. When a rain has an opportunity to drain on a slope at 10%, it's not going to want to drain out the back where a slope might be 1 or 2%. And actually our key map on our plan that's submitted as part of the application identifies the drainage easement at the rear of the property of one of the neighbors that spoke, lot 78. It has a drainage, it actually has a drainage easement at the back of lot 79, 78, and 77. It's two of the people that spoke, and it drains, and that drainage easement runs north-south.
But doesn't that say that some of the water is coming from this property over in that direction?
No, I think that identifies the drainage improvements that one of the neighbors referred to that takes runoff from the upslope homes. This neighbor is getting runoff. This neighbor is getting runoff from, or the applicant's getting runoff from their neighbor to the right. Everybody upslope.
Right. So that storm drainage easement starts at property 178, I guess, right?
Right, and then 79, that's from the tax map.
Okay, from 79. So you're saying none of the water that's picking up is coming from the applicant's property?
Zero, Mr. Chairman, it's not an absolute. The direction of runoff from this site, its primary direction is north-south. And to the extent, there's a concern, and I know there is a concern, we could do some regrading beyond the toe of our retaining wall to confirm that all the runoff is directed from south to north.
That's what I was thinking. Could you swell on it?
Right, yes.
Okay. So that would be a condition, and you would swale it so no water could run onto Miss Sprague's property.
Correct.
Mike, is there enough space? You've got 16 feet, I think, on the north and south sides. Is that enough to do a swale?
Now, the swale would be in back of the tennis court where we have 25 feet. And I would say it would be a narrow swale because the slope is so steep there, it wouldn't have to be long and broad. The capacity would be pretty high because of the slope.
Okay.
Okay, so that would solve the runoff problem. Plus, your earlier testimony is saying that this is not going to. I think one of the witness public said that because this absorbs water faster than what's there, there's more water to pick up downhill.
That's the testimony of the manufacturer, Frank.
Right. Well, assuming the manufacturer is right, well, the neighbor, it sort of puts it on their head. You're saying it's a good thing that this thing picks up water faster than what's there. But the member of the public, I think, was saying that's bad because there's actually more water going down because it's got picked up. You follow me?
No.
Okay, so bottom line is you're still saying that this does not put more water into those properties behind.
Right. The whole concern with runoff is introducing a surface that doesn't allow as much runoff into the ground, like pavement or sidewalk or a roof. This is a surface that has the opposite effect. It allows more runoff to go into the ground.
Right,
So,
but I think the person that was behind was saying that's a bad thing because it's going in the ground and then it's ending up on her property, you know, making her property muddy. It would be better off if it kept on going. If it didn't, if it could pass across this property faster.
Frank, should I make a motion to reopen the public?
Yeah.
All right, I just made the motion to reopen the public.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Public's open. Okay, so you see what I'm saying? So she's saying that, I think she's saying that it's better if the water passed across this thing faster instead of being absorbed, because if it's absorbed, it can end up going laterally into her property and making her property mushy.
yeah, from an engineering
Right,
standpoint, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, hi, this is Jyoti from 211 Duval Road. Yeah, so we have a storm drain in the back of our property. And I think what the gentleman was just describing was probably the scenario that I referred to, where if you have a well-permeable soils through which water is going to pass faster, I understand that the water flow is going to be where your slope is the greatest. But as it goes further south, that flow is going to get directed into the storm drain. But that's what the drain is designed to do, isn't it? So so I'm kind of addressing the concern that as that water is coming through, it's going to get directed into the storm drain that's designed to remove that water off of everyone's property and get it out to the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, that's surface runoff. Yes. We should have less surface runoff from this site at the end. And to go to the chairman's point, to kind of take that logic further, then one could argue that making this a paved court would be better than making it a permeable, surface. And that seems counterintuitive.
Right.
We're trying to permit groundwater recharge.
Right.
Right.
Somebody's got crickets.
Okay, again, since we're open to public, anybody else have additional questions from this this discussion for Mike?
It doesn't look like anyone else is coming in.
Motion to close the public.
Motion to close, second? Public closed.
Wait, who seconded it?
Huh? I thought I heard Philomena say it, but anyway.
I'll second it.
It is sufficient. The chairman declares it closed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I close the application and present a closing argument?
Yeah, please go ahead, Mr.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and members of the public. Let's look at what this application is. It's an application for an impervious coverage variance. And the main issue on an impervious coverage variance is drainage and whether it'll have any substantial negative impact on the surrounding area. I think the testimony from Mr. Ford is conclusive and persuasive that in and of itself, this increase in impervious coverage by virtue of your definition in your ordinance is appropriate based on the surfacing of the tennis court. So I do think that that's a positive feature in terms of support of the impervious coverage variance. Now let's look at some of the mitigation factors that were offered and addressed by the applicant. The first one is trees and buffering. The applicant was quite candid in meeting with the neighbor to the rear and indicated that the applicant was willing to provide a landscaping buffer plan that would be satisfactory, hopefully, to the neighbors. That would be on the rear part of the property. Tree replacement. The applicant agreed to, as a condition of approval, to replace the trees, to first inventory the trees, the type of trees that would be necessarily disturbed and removed, and to replace them accordingly, subject to the satisfaction of either Mr. Gorman or the board's representative. Let's also talk about Mrs. Haynes' concern, which is a serious concern about the drainage. You have an engineer, a board engineer, Mr. Euro. You have Mr. Ford testifying that he will satisfy all the concerns of Mr. Euro. So if the board is willing to rely on its board engineer for the drainage issue, then I think that that's a satisfactory condition of approval. And what would happen if Mr. Euro does not agree that there's a satisfactory solution? Then I guess we're back to the board. So there's another condition of mitigation. Also, the DNR Canal Commission, regardless of what this board does in approving this application, if the board does approve the application, it is subject to review and approval by the DNR Canal Commission. So you have another set of eyes that are going to be looking at this particular application. I am personally not persuaded by the neighbors' comments about the size of a piece of property as it relates to a recreational facility. You heard from Mr. O'Brien, the planner. You heard from him on the fact that recreational accessory uses are absolutely, totally permitted in this zone. And that's regardless of the size of the property. That is absolutely regardless of the size of the property. As a matter of fact, this accessory structure, the testimony reveals, satisfies all of the setback requirements of the zone. So to discriminate against an applicant who has a residential piece of property in a residential zone who would like to install a tennis court on the basis that, well, maybe tennis courts don't fit within X square feet of property, I think is not appropriate and not proper. So I think you can safely approve this variance and impose conditions which will satisfactorily address the issues that were raised. And let's look specifically at Mr. O'Brien's testimony to which was given at the end of the hearing. Mr. O'Brien testified that all the bases were touched. All the bases were touched on the positive and negative criteria from a planning perspective. So what do you have? You have an engineering opinion that can be backed up or not backed up by Mr. Euro on the impervious coverage variance as it relates to the technical engineering issues. And you have the traditional planning and zoning issues, which I believe were more than satisfactorily addressed by Mr. O'Brien. And then you add on to that reasonable conditions to make sure that the board is making the correct decision and imposing these restrictions on the applicant. So I thank you for your time. It's a long hearing for an impervious coverage variance, but I think it was a worthwhile hearing. And I think that everyone has had an adequate opportunity to express their concerns and address their issues. But I do believe we've proven the case.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Linus. Okay, I'll open this up for board discussion.
Do we have any further comments from either Patrick or from Mark?
Ms. Haynes, I have no further comments. I do have put together a list of things which have been discussed, which might or might not be conditions the board might want to impose. When the time comes, I'd be glad to go through that for the board.
Well, why don't we hold those until we get a motion, but Patrick, anything more?
Yes, I just wanted to remind the applicant that we're not going with 7 members at this point. It's yourself, Mr. Herbert, Ms. Erickson, Ms. Lilly, and I forget, I'm sorry. and
Walker.
Mr. Walker, as part of his application.
All right, we do have a quorum. It's a C variance. 5 members are eligible to vote. And I do believe we need a simple majority
Correct.
of the 5.
Yep, just wanted to point that out for you, Mr. Lance.
So what do you suggest, if we delayed the vote, you have 7, then you have to have 4 out of 7 instead of 3 out of 5?
No, this is not a use variance.
I know that.
No.
I know that. Okay. Board discussion?
I guess, Frank, I'll just make a simple statement that the issue revolves around the impervious coverage. I felt there was not firsthand testimony about the material involved in the permeability rate was provided on paper by the manufacturer. I just have some concerns in addition to the height of the fence and some of the other issues. But as Mr. Linus said, the application centers around the impervious, and I think the material and the lack of unbiased information about that is a concern of mine.
What would it take to overcome that concern, Chicken?
Frank, we just had 2 hours of testimony.
No, but it sounds like you're looking for further testimony, maybe from the manufacturer, some other expert witness on this product.
I just know what was presented tonight.
Mr. Chairman, the application is closed for testimony at this point.
Right.
It is not beyond the power of the board, certainly at least with the consent of the applicant, to reopen it, but at least at this stage, it's closed.
I understand that. I'm just, trying to, find out what would help Ms. Haynes to, with the concern. Okay, any other comments from the members of the board? Okay, hearing none, do I hear a motion? I don't hear a motion. In my own opinion, is like Mr. Linus said, this is for an impervious surface coverage. I think the testimony satisfied me that the runoff will not be a problem, especially if they put that swale along the back. I'm not particularly happy about the height of the fence on top of the wall, but at least the trees on that end will help. And like I said, this is a permitted use, so I can't see any objection for denying this, in my opinion, because I think they met the requirements for the impervious surface coverage, which is what this is about. Okay, so in that case, do I hear a motion?
We have some people on mute.
And make sure everybody's off mute. Janine, you're off mute. Jim, you're off mute. Philomena is off mute.
Janine is still, oh, she just unmuted.
Okay. Mark, what do you do when you don't have a motion?
Well, Frank, as chair, you can step down and make a motion.
That Ms. Haynes is certainly correct about that part. If there is in fact no motion, then the effect of this will be that there is a denial, because the requirement is that it be approved affirmatively. So the failure to act is a rejection.
Okay, so let me step down. Ms. Haynes will step up. I'd like to make a motion to approve this with the conditions that that we've been talking about: the berm along the back, the trees along the side. Like I said, I can't see any reason to deny this. I think they made the objections for the impervious surface coverage. This does not make the situation worse. As a matter of fact, it may even improve the drainage situation. So I make a motion to approve this application.
Frank, ask for, is there a second to your motion?
I can't second my own emotion.
No, you can't.
This is Philomena. I'll second the motion with the stipulation that added to that specifically, if Mark could come in and make the motion a little bit more specific. The reason I'm saying the second is because I believe there is a possibility to review this application if it passes this evening. So if Mark could just add to Frank's motion with the specifics that we're looking for this evening in the correct and appropriate method, I would second that motion.
All right, well, that's not really technically a second, but certainly I have heard Ms. Lilly's request. I can't say what conditions should be imposed, but as I indicated earlier, I have made notes about things that in the discussion appeared to me to be potential conditions. So if I can run down those, and if there's a motion that includes those in a second, then we at least can move forward to a vote. I might add before I do that, that an alternative in my mind is that the board carry this for the purposes of discussion. I think that's a permissible action by the board. All right, things I have heard that, as I say, are not conditions in my mind, only those things that have been discussed that the board may choose to make conditions. No lighting. I don't think that one's really debatable. The applicant has indicated an agreement with that. There is certainly discussion about maintenance. I don't have specifics as to what maintenance should be performed beyond the fact that the applicant has provided what the manufacturer appears to think is the necessary maintenance. Separate from that, there is the question that was raised about whether the surface needs to be maintained in a short-term sense. That is, that it needs to be kept wet so that it doesn't create dust. DNR canal approval, of course, it would be a standard condition. As I pointed out to the board before, even if the board didn't make it a condition, it is. They have control. Fence height was discussed. Again, that is something that could be made a part of the condition. Replacement of trees, that is, at least as I understood from the applicant, is something the applicant has agreed to, but there are really no specifics as to that. So I can only say that that general issue was something that was raised as potentially something that could be a condition. Mr. Gorman referred more specifically to a tree line buffer, which he didn't say specifically, but I presume would be subject to the approval of the planning department and or the board engineer.
Mark, if I can just piggyback on those last two comments with trees. One, we're making sure that it doesn't kick in any additional variances in regards from the tree mitigation ordinance. Where in particular that 20% of the trees removed from a residential property would then thus kick in another variance for trees.
Mr. Gorman certainly raises an appropriate point. There is no request for a variance from the, or exception from the tree mitigation ordinance. So regardless of what approval is or is not given in this case, if there were any approval, it would be still subject to the confirmation that a variance for tree mitigation is not necessary.
Correct. But we need to know the numbers of the trees that need to be provided at the same time. So Mr. Euro and I have to take a look at that.
Yes.
Provide that information.
Again, that certainly would be appropriate for a condition if the board wanted to make it a condition. But my point is, it is effectively a condition anyway, because there's no request for an exception. If
Correct.
Mr. Gorman's or the engineer's review shows that such a variance is necessary, applicant's going to have to come back for that anyway.
Correct.
The last two that I have, actually the last one I have, let me focus on that because that's essentially what Mr. Gorman was just referring to, that there's a suggestion at least that there should be an inventory and a plan for replacement of trees. And then lastly, discussion with Mr. Ford suggested a condition about further grading, perhaps a swale that would prevent or minimize runoff on the north side. Those are the issues that I have made note of. Again, I emphasize those are not recommendations. Those are my observations. Mr. Gorman is certainly in a position to make recommendations, not my part to make recommendations. And I also emphasize that if I haven't noted it and the board thinks it should be a condition, what I've listed is not necessarily the outer limits of what the board might want to impose.
Since I made the motion, I agree to every one of them. You take better notes than me, Mark.
I think I could probably get that into a proposed resolution.
Yes. Okay, so that's my motion. Do I hear a second? Yeah. Go on. Chicky, you got to ask that question. Chicky, you're the chairman right now.
Yeah, what's your question? I'm not seconding it.
No, I'm saying I'm agreeing to all those conditions. They should be in my motion. And I modified my motion to include all those conditions. And we need a second.
Ms. Haynes, the chairman, I believe, is simply pointing out that at this moment, he's not chairing the meeting. You are.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. Is there a second to the motion? Hearing none. Mark?
Again, the board, if it chooses, I believe has the power to carry this. Maybe members of the board want to think about it more.
Yeah.
Maybe the board wants to have additional members of the board review the transcript or the recording to see whether another member who reviews the testimony is prepared to make a second. Or if the board chooses not to carry it, then the failure of a second to the motion.
I would prefer to carry it and let everybody think about it. We had a lot to discuss tonight.
Well, I'll ask the other members, if I poll them, do you want to make a vote or do you want to take a vote tonight or postpone it?
I would prefer to take a vote tonight, please, if that's
okay. Jim, what's your feeling?
I'll vote tonight.
Phil?
I will vote tonight.
I think that's everybody, right? Okay, and I agree. Let's take a vote tonight.
Well, again, we are not at a point to take a vote. We are at a point where if there's no second, there is no need for a vote. The application is effectively denied.
Okay, once again, is there a second to Frank's motion? Hearing none, the applicant is denied. The application, is that correct, Mark?
That is correct.
Okay, Frank, I'm turning it back to you.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock. could we hear the next application to get that out of the way, even though we normally don't start at 10 o'clock for new applications?
I think we technically need to make since we're taking testimony after 10 o'clock by the bylaws, we need to just make a vote, make it official that we're going to be starting something after 10 o'clock.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Well, the technicality, Mr. Gorman is certainly correct. It would be appropriate for the board to take a position on that.
Let me ask Frank, or why don't you poll members if we're willing to go another half hour, if we can get that second one in.
Okay, Chicky, you willing?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Janine?
Yes.
Philomena?
Yes.
Frank, yes. Okay.
All right, before we proceed, point of order, Mr. Chairman, I have the third application. It clearly will not be reached tonight based on what I hear from the board.
Yes.
Can we schedule it and carry the hearing to a new date without the necessity of further notice?
Yes. Patrick, how does the calendar look?
Calendar starts getting a little tight as we go towards the end of the year. Though technically we don't have anything on at this point for October 7th. We have October 7th, November 4th, and December 2nd as our remainder dates of the year.
Mr. Gorman, where do we stand on time for decision on the Timco case?
Timco, we will need an extension. We're good till 9:30.
Mr. Linus, I assume that you would grant an appropriate extension.
If we can have the October 7th meeting, we would grant the appropriate extension.
Let's do it, Frank.
Let's do it.
Okay?
Okay, do we need to vote on that?
Yes, you should take a vote.
Okay, motion to adjourn that application to October 7th.
Without further notice.
And
So moved.
Mr. Linus's request is without further notice. If the board agrees with that, that should be part of the motion.
That was part of the motion.
Without further notice. Those in favor?
Aye.
Well,
Aye.
hear a second? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay.
Wait,
Mr. Liz, I'll have Eva follow up with you tomorrow about the next steps.
Oh, wait, let's vote. Jim made a second. Those in favor?
My apologies.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
See you on October 7th.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those members of the public who were here and interested in the application, they're based on the motion that was approved by the board. There will be no further notice requirements on the applicant. This is your notice to appear at in whatever form it takes place at the October 7th meeting, which begins at 7, Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Well, we hope to be 7.
Hope to be 7. Begins at 7, and we'll see everybody there who's interested in the application.
Good.
Thank you and good evening.
Thank you. The next application is Prashant and Bakru. If I have that right, file BA 2002. Patrick, would you introduce that, please?
Yep, one second, let me get my right form here. My apologies. My agenda has escaped me.
Locate the agenda.
I had it. I got a pile of papers.
Okay, I can read it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, this is a block 175.17, lot 15.03, 6 Stanberry Court. Applicant seeking C bulk variance to place an accessory structure in the front yard and maximum impervious surface relief to construct an in-the-ground swimming pool with paved patio and walkway, and any other variances, waivers, and approvals of property in the R district. Okay, so Mr. Prashant, do you want to tell us what you're going to do?
Yeah, sure. Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, you certainly read correctly what is on the agenda, but I do think it might be of some, if the board heard from Mr. Gorman, because the application refers to a front yard, but this is not a typical situation. And even before the applicant speaks, perhaps it would be helpful if the board and the public were aware of what this means really on the ground.
Yes.
Mr. Gorman, I believe you're quite able to do that.
Yes, thank you, Mark. So the application that's in front of us right now is a rather unique situation where the property technically has two front yards, and this is otherwise known as a through lot, where you have a frontage on Danbury, and then there's another technical frontage along Amwell Road. The front of the house and the driveway and such do connect to Danbury. The ordinance does permit for lots to have this unique situation that they can have accessory structures in a quote unquote front yard per se at the back of the house along Amwell Road. In this case, they're proposing a pool as long as they meet the front yard setbacks. Front yard setbacks are not being met at this point, so we are here for one of two variances. One for placing technically a accessory structure in a front yard. The front yard in this case being along Amwell Road, that on Danbury, and then also for the impervious coverage.
And I might add that this is my favorite one. This came out, that this front yard change in the ordinance several years ago came out of a recommendation from the Board of Adjustment at that time. We used to get a lot of these and we were greatly reduced because of the new ordinance. But in this case, they have a setback situation. Okay, so Mr. Prashant, why don't you tell us what you can do?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, fine.
Oh, great. Good evening and appreciate your time. So just like what Mr. Gorman pointed out, we front Amwell Road and Danbury Court. And we wanted to build a walkway, patio, and an in-ground pool. The in-ground pool would be 32 by 14 feet. And the patio and walkway would total 1,520 square feet. And the property is an R zone, which allows for 15% impervious coverage. Currently, we're currently non-conforming at 15.7, and we're asking for an additional 3.3% for a total of 19% impervious coverage, including all these improvements. And in regards to the setback variance that we're requesting, the required setback variance in our situation for our rear yard, which is actually a front yard, because it fronts two roads, is 50 feet, and our proposed is 20.2 feet.
Okay, so I understand that you have an expert witness tonight.
Yeah, so my expert witness is the engineer on the project, Mr. Chester DiLorenzo.
Mr. Lorenzo.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
We need to have you sworn in.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Lorenzo, raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
So help me God.
Okay, please state your full name for the record.
My name is Chester DiLorenzo, D-I-L-O-R-E-N-Z-O. I'm the principal of Midstate Engineering. I was a 1976, I'm sorry, I was going to go ahead and give my credentials. I'm a 1976 graduate of Villanova University. I got my professional engineering license in New Jersey in '83, my professional planning license in 1983, my professional land surveying license in 1989, I believe. I've been preparing land use applications along this line in this nature for the past 37 years or so. And I have appeared before in Hillsborough. I don't believe the last time I appeared in front of the Board of Adjustment, but I did do planning board work in Hillsborough last time.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, the doctor did a very good job, I think, as an attorney. I would indicate that he has an existing dwelling.
Mr. Chairman, let me, I don't like to interrupt, but Mr. DiLorenzo has more than one qualification. I want to make it clear on the record for what areas he is being accepted. And Mr. DiLorenzo, your intention is to speak both to engineering and planning aspects?
That is correct, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. DiLorenzo has clearly indicated that he has qualifications in both areas. So if he is being accepted as an expert, I would like just the record to reflect that he's being accepted in both disciplines.
Both of those, right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If I may continue, Dr. Crew and his, actually doctors per crew, again, live at 6 Danbury Court. They have a beautiful home there. It happens to be, as the chairman accurately indicated, a through lot or through lot type of a lot where there's an access easement from Amwell Road to access Danbury Court in the event of an emergency, effectively leaving 2 smaller parcels. He's got he applied for it and was granted a zoning permit to build a dwelling in 2016. He built a very attractive 4,100 square foot home there. He decided he'd like to put in a pool so he could have recreation for his children and a place for him to sit in the evening. When he went to get the zoning application, he realized that he needed needed a variance, or we needed to put the pool in the 0.4 acre wooded area located on the west side of the access easement. Again, the doctors made a decision that it'd be to their benefit to have the pool behind the dwelling and ask for the variances rather than to take out a very large amount of trees, which they tend to believe are beautiful and work nice for them from a privacy standpoint, as well as the other dwellings in this neighborhood. So they asked us to put together a pool plan for a modest pool of some 14 by 32 square feet with about a 1,500 square foot patio that they could sit on their patio, watch their children enjoy the pool, as well as their nieces and nephews, which also are Hillsborough residents that would be using the pool with their other relatives and sit in the back patio. For that reason, we have a 4,187 square foot dwelling with steps and walkways. We have a 2,800 square foot driveway. And the reason the driveway is so large is because they could not put it on the westerly side of the house because of the emergency access easement. So they chose to put a longer driveway on the easterly side of the house, and they have a small front walk. We have a drainage pattern that flows from Danbury Court to Amwell Road. All the stormwater would be running from the dwelling to Amwell Road, and there'll be no negative drainage impacts caused to contiguous property owners. With regards to the fact that they chose not to destroy any of the wooded area, that's 18,000 square feet on their property of trees that they decided to leave and request the variance instead. So therefore, we have a situation where the variance is here. We have the reverse lot frontage, of course, where we have the pool at 20 feet from the right of way of Amwell Road. We have what's the other variance? I'm sorry. And the impervious coverage variance, where we have an existing allowed 15% coverage, we have a 15.7 coverage, and with the 1,500 square feet of patio, we will be up to 19%, which we believe are being mitigated by the fact that with drainage going to Amwell Road, we're not impacting our neighbors, and it was a better choice to choose to have the impervious coverage to the rear of the dwelling, to the front of Amwell Road, than to destroy a very large and attractive wooded parcel on their own property. We looked at the planning aspects of this project as well, and from the planning aspects, there's 13 properties within 200 feet of this property. At the present time, 3 of them have pools, and I believe 1 of them has an approval for a pool, which is the contiguous neighbor at lot 15.04. Of these properties, we believe only 15.04 required a variance for impervious coverage. In a similar manner to this property, I think when the developers who constructed Danbury Court put it in, it's just a little bit too long for this lot that it cannot really use its own backyard for any purpose without getting a variance. And again, it's the cul-de-sac is a little bit long, so that the other 4 lots could in fact have an existence on the property. We've looked at the master plan, we've looked at the ordinances, and we believe that from the aspects of health, safety, light, airspace, open space, recreation, that this application is a net positive for the doctors and their children, and there's no negative impact to the community. So we feel that this is a pretty good application from that standpoint. We believe again that the site will be used for recreation and socialization. The doctors, because of the COVID-19 epidemic, have had no vacation for quite some time, and they feel that they can at least utilize their own backyard with a pool and with the ability to sit and to socialize with family members, that it would help release some of the stress they're feeling. From the negative standpoint, there's no nearby homes that are being impacted. There's no substantial detriment to the public good. In fact, in our opinion, we don't feel there's any detriment to the public good. There's no detriment to the master plan. Again, both of the applicants are in fact doctors, and the patio was sized adequately so that they could utilize the patio with some of their relatives who are also Hillsborough residents to be able to watch the children play in the pool and not destroy the trees that are on the westerly side of the property and not impact the existing emergency access easement. I tried to keep it as quick and as short as I could because of the late hour, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And let me, can you bring your display down so I can see everybody? I think your sharing is holding up.
It's me?
Who's sharing?
No, it wasn't me. Yeah.
Okay.
I was, Mr. Chairman. What do you need at this point?
Okay, so so questions from members of the board.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I don't mean to interrupt. I wanted to indicate that I have received reports from the engineer, the planner, and the fire department, fire and examiners and fire marshal, I'm sorry, and that we are in agreement with the reports. They asked for very minor revisions to the plan, that the grading is more or less adequate. And it's our opinion that we would comply with the reports if the application were to be approved. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And I had checked with the planner yesterday. I asked him the question, what would happen if this was a residence behind his property instead of a road? And the setback would have been 40 feet instead of 50. Still not 20, but it's the reason it's 50 is because of the ordinance requiring the front setback. Questions from members of the board? Okay, no questions. Okay, let's open it up for the questions from the, okay, I'll open public. Motion to open public.
Mr. Chairman, before you go to the Mr. DiLorenzo, just a couple of questions. I do appreciate the fact that you were brief and to the point, given the hour. I look at the map that was presented here. Would it be fair to say that this property is unusual, if not unique, in its configuration?
I don't know whether I discussed a flexible seat or a hardship, but I would say it's a very unique in its configuration due to its short depth. I might call this a hardship variance.
Yeah, that's of course the reason I asked the question.
Yes,
you said that the nearest residence to this one is some distance, and that my observation of the map, that seems to be true. Can you quantify that to any extent? I mean, it strikes me as fairly considerable.
The nearest contiguous resident is on lot 15.04. Dwelling to dwelling is about 180 horizontal feet.
All right. And lastly, you may or may not be able to address this. If not, I certainly hope the applicant can. But you've indicated that the current impervious coverage on this lot is 15.7%. As far as I know, there has never been an approval to exceed the 15%. Do you have any explanation? Can you shed any light on how this has come into violation without approval? I grant you it's a small violation, but do you know anything about that?
I do not. I was not involved with the original application. After we surveyed it, we found that the site was in fact over.
All right, thank you. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
A motion to open public.
So moved.
Second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Yes. Okay, so Jim asked to open the public lines. We'll ask anybody that's left, which is 2 people, if they have any questions for this witness.
Anthony Tochi, yes, I do.
Okay.
Could you please tell me, your system is very poor. It took 40 minutes or so for you guys to come online, and I can't even get you. I'm listening to the phone, and I see no maps or anything. My first question is, coming down Danbury, I'm right next to Danbury, my house is. When you come down Danbury, is the property in question all the way at the end?
Yes, sir.
Second question, how far is it from my property? That would be to the right. My property runs continuous from South Branch to Amwell Road.
Well, if it runs all the way to Amwell Road, it's the contiguous parcel, and the proposed pool would then be 135 horizontal feet to your property line, and the patio would be 100 feet from your property line.
Okay, one of the things I'm concerned with is flooding, okay? Taking water onto my property. Could anybody guarantee me that that will not happen?
I don't know if I can guarantee anything. I can indicate that based upon the topography we shot there, the stormwater runs from the dwelling to Amwell Road itself. In fact, there's a 114 contour off in the right of way between my property and, I'm sorry, the applicant's property and your property. And there's a 115 right behind it, indicating that the water that flows off our property would not really go into your property. And the water from your property would also go to Amwell Road at that corner. That's the closest spot we have that could impact your property, sir.
What happens if it does? Who repairs it?
I believe the planner or engineer could answer that, but I believe they would come and they would and they would ask us to confirm that it was our fault, and they would require this applicant or his contractor to confirm it. Am I correct, Mr. Euro?
That would be correct.
So that means I would have to make an application to either you folks or the court to get this done.
Not an application, a complaint. I'm sorry. Not an application, a complaint. You would complain to the planner. He would tell the engineer they'd contact us, and we would determine whether we caused a problem and at which time they would direct us to repair it. It's not an application. It's not even, it's just a complaint. Last time something.
Okay, here's why I'm asking. When Danbury Court was made, the houses were made, there is one right alongside my house right now, and that took over the Mendy property where they had their house. They also had a swimming pool, but this goes back a long time, okay? And happy to see people come in, happy to see people happy, nice folks. And what had happened was when they graded it, they made it higher than my property, and they graded it into my property.
Mr. Chairman, I am concerned that this is not a question, and the witness, the speaker, is not sworn.
Can you change that into a question instead of a statement so we can?
Sure. What happens if there's damage? With all the experts, they all swear it's okay, and this is my only concern. And I welcome a pool. I welcome the children. I just don't want to get into seeing damage to my property and me have to go to court and fight this. That's the only concern I have. The people are welcome, and they're welcome for the pool and their patio. It's their land. They should be able to do what they like with it. That's my only concern.
Can you tell me what exactly? I missed which property you're on. I'm looking at the key map right now. So you're on South Branch Road?
Yeah, if you were looking down Danbury Court.
Right.
I'm the next house on the right. White house, green shutters.
Oh, you're on Danbury Court?
No, I'm on South Branch Road.
South Branch, okay. So I'm looking at this property 1501 at the beginning across the municipal building, and 1505. And...
No, Mr. Chairman, he's 1603.
Okay, so okay, I see that now. Okay.
That's my only concern. Yeah. Just to guarantee that I will not have to put out any money with attorneys.
Right. Now, for the witness, is there any way of spoiling that? So guarantee that the water
I was gonna suggest that we only have 71 feet of frontage on the gentleman's property. However, since we're doing dirt work on the property anyway, we can probably put in a swale between the conservation easement and that portion of the driveway to guarantee the water goes away from it.
Yeah, because you have enough space on there, right?
We do. We do.
So that'll be taken care of?
Right, so
Yeah,
what
the
he's saying,
swale
you
to
put a
make-
swale so the water can't, come onto your property.
Absolutely can't, correct?
Not unless water moves uphill.
It's New Jersey, you never can tell.
What I'm gonna say is we're gonna go above and beyond what we've already shown here to make sure that our water does not get on your property. I can't guarantee anybody else's water, but I can guarantee that the water from our driveway.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, and
Thank
to answer your original problems, we were, as you saw, we were very frustrated at the beginning of this meeting because this is our second Zoom meeting since lockdown. And the first one, we had no problems. Why we're having these technical problems tonight, it's very frustrating.
Good luck with Zoom. Good luck.
Mr. Chairman, again, for the record, just let me point out that it is indicated in the notice that all these documents are on Civic Clerk.
Yes.
So I understand that
Right.
Speaker is being deprived of the video at the moment, but he does have, if he has internet access, he has access to all the documents.
Right, and to Mr. Anderson's point, you can go up to the township website and drill down to boards and go over to the Board of Adjustment. And then you could, from there, go to the meeting tonight, and you'll see all the documents that we're looking at. It's posted on the township website.
3.5 hours, sure. Listen, I'm okay with this. You put in the swale, whatever. That's all I wanted to know. The only other question is, once they get in the pool, will I be able to swim and partake in barbecue?
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely.
Hey, gentlemen, good luck. Thank you. I hope the kids have a great time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Let me bring this down so I can see what's going on again. Okay, so any more questions? Okay, so anybody else from the public have questions for this witness? Okay, hearing none?
No, none at this time.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, Mr. Anderson, just a quick thought. From what I gather is that they're requesting relief known as a C1 as a hardship at this point, and that's covering the two variances at once or just one of the variances?
Actually, both variances.
I leave it to Mr. DiLorenzo to indicate what he believes is appropriate on behalf of the applicant. My question was simply directed at the fact that it's an unusual lot, and I wanted to make sure it's not on the record.
I mean, that's why I picked up on it. I just wanted to make sure we had enough on the record.
okay, motion to close public,
So moved.
second?
Second.
Second, public close. Okay, board discussion?
I see no problems with this. It's a unique lot shape, and they're going to take care of the neighbors' concerns. And I think it's within a reasonable amount of overage on the impervious.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone higher in this development, so this is even on the low side for that. And as far as the backyard, I mean, it is what it is. So,
Ms. Haynes, your motion includes the agreement that the swale be placed between the applicant's property and, as I understand it, lot 16.03.
Yes, it does.
okay, second.
I'll second it, Philomena.
Okay,
Mark, this is going to include Mr. Euros and my reports as a condition, the following recommendations in there?
Absolutely.
The engineer indicated that they were agreeing to those things, yes.
Okay.
okay. Roll call, please, Tina.
Yes, Miss Haynes,
Yes.
Miss Salili,
Yes.
Miss Erickson,
Yes.
Mr. Walmarker,
Yes.
Chairman Herbert.
Yes, application passed. Enjoy your pool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so what's left? Okay, so we're gonna We moved the last application to October 7th.
Correct.
The next meeting is September 16th. We have 3 applications that evening.
Yes, Christian community and 2 homeowner applications.
Yep.
Patrick, would Timco be scheduled first on that October meeting?
I would think so. There are potential applications to complete at the moment. We'll be putting on that, but that's gonna be a larger application.
Let's put it first. You know, we missed getting started tonight because of the technical issues, so it wasn't their fault.
Sure. Yep. And then October 7th full at this point, I assume. Then we're open for November 4th and December 2nd after that. We'll see how September 16th goes. We shouldn't need to add any more meetings, but if we do, now's the time to put something on for October, because we don't want to be running into November and December if we have to add a meeting. At that point, it's too much for everyone to handle with the holidays.
From the list I saw, so we have the 3 meetings on the 16th. We have Timco on the 7th. And there were 3 applications that are almost ready to go and 2 that weren't, right?
Yeah, I have 2 applications that are incomplete, yet to be scheduled, and then we got 3 more homeowners in that we need to review for completeness.
I would suggest that we wait until the 16th to see if we need an additional, that still gives us a month, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
we'll see how we are. We'll see how we are on 16th.
okay. I thought you were saying do it now.
If we have another Zoom problem,
Okay.
I don't want to add anything on if we don't need to.
Okay, so we're finished. The motion to close the meeting, adjourn. Anybody?
We need
Oh my God, you can't even make a motion on that? I'll make the motion.
I'll step down if I have to.
Hey,
I'd
Tina,
like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting, please, as soon as possible. Do I have a second? I'm sorry, Frank, I couldn't resist.
Second.
Thank you, Janine.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry for the delays.
Everyone have a good evening.
You too.
Good night, everyone.